Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of A Day in the Parks, the series where I just sort of wander around the different versions of Minecraft Disney World, Disneyland, that exists across multiple servers, run by and created by fans. And today we're here back on, good old MC Magic, where I started, and we're here in Epcot, and I don't know, I'm in an Epcot kind of mood today, so I figured I'd just wander around Epcot a bit, ride some rides. I actually wonder if they have Frozen Ever After open yet. We can walk over and check. It might be a little too soon for that. Otherwise, we'll ride some rides, talk a little bit of Disney, and have a good time. It's funny, I really didn't prepare for this one coming into it. And now that I do the TTA podcast with Christine, and I'm sort of doing 3 videos a week that are all about Disney, I find myself at times like trying really hard to find Disney things to talk about that aren't repetitive. Like I just did a TTA on vlogging, so I can't really talk about vlogging here. I don't know. Maybe I was drawn here to Epcot because well, one, I want to go there. I haven't been here in can't say a while, but I haven't been here in a little bit, and I really want to go back, but also because it's been on my mind a lot. And I actually almost recorded a video, I want to say a couple of weeks ago, on what I was calling Epcot's identity crisis. I might have actually talked about this on a past Day in the Park, so I'll keep it short. Just about how I feel like Future World is poised to change quite a bit. There are a lot of rumors about Ellen getting replaced, rumors about Imagination closing, rumors about Innovations closing. That's not as much of a rumor anymore at this point. I mean, I think all but one Innovations, what would you call them? Little areas in Innovation has closed. And it seems like they're just waiting for the contract on the last one to run out so that they could go ahead and just close the whole area down. I think the idea behind that rumor is that they would convert Innovations East into a sort of event space, similar to what they're doing with the Wonders of Life Pavilion now for like Flower and Garden and stuff like that. And then what they would do is tear down the Wonders of Life and then use that space for a new ride, or combine that space with the Ellen's Energy Adventure space to do like one giant ride. But that's sort of the rumors that are prevailing. And it's just interesting because it looks like Future World's going to go under a big change if any of this is true. And I think a lot of people are against the idea because they think of Future World as the concept that was there when Epcot opened up. And this is a big shift from that. And that's sort of going against, I don't know, kind of Walt's wishes, but I don't know, I disagree. And maybe that's because I'm a big fan of Walt's idea of Epcot, which is the city, and that never happened. And that'll probably never happen, and I actually think it's probably good that it will never happen because I honestly don't believe it would have worked. But because Epcot as a whole is sort of already a compromise on Walt's vision, I guess I just don't mind if they change it some more, like just to keep it fresh and keep it exciting for people. I mean, we're here in Norway, Frozen. A lot of people were upset about this ride because, not because they were anti-Frozen, although there were plenty of people anti-Frozen, but just because it wasn't like a Norway-themed ride. And yet I kind of thought it was a good change, especially after riding it. Standby entrance 140, that's awesome. Well, we could go ride the ride in Mexico. Why not? Let's go do that instead. So, I almost made this video about Epcot's identity change where I actually wrote a letter to Epcot and was talking about how, it shouldn't be worried about changing, and sort of, I don't know, a means of talking about this without just talking directly into the camera. And I scrapped it ultimately. It seemed a little too pessimistic for my taste, and it just seemed like it was a bad time because everything's a rumor and nothing's confirmed yet, and so why make this video? But I'm definitely trying to think of different ways to have those talks about Disney besides just sitting in front of a camera and just talking to it. One thing I am interested in talking about is so I picked up a book this week. Yesterday I went to the San Gennaro Festival in Little Italy in Manhattan. Happens every year. It's like a week or two long. It's really cool. If you ever go to New York when it's going on, you should totally check it out. It's a really cool street festival. And Kat and I went, and we had fried mini donuts covered in Nutella, and it was amazing. And after that, we walked up to bookstores. And whenever I go to a bookstore, I'm just instinctively looking for Disney-related books. And I didn't find anything directly Disney-related, but what I did find was there's this series of books called Images of Modern America. I don't know if they do this everywhere, but they have these regional book series. In New York, it's pretty popular, where they're essentially mostly picture books of parts of New York City from the past. So you could look up your neighborhood. So like my old neighborhood, I could look up something like a Richmond Hill, and it would have photos of Richmond Hill from like 1910, 1920, 1930. And so it's a cool way to like go, oh, wow, this is a block I walk down every day, and this is what it looked like, 80, 90, 100 years ago. And they had a series on the 1964, 1965's New York World's Fair, which took place in Queens in Flushing Meadows Park. Flushing Meadows. Which one is it? Why doesn't it say on the back here? And why am I blanking on which one it is? In any case, it was not run by Disney, but Disney was heavily involved. And if you know your history of Disney World, this fair was actually really important because what it was two things for Disney. It was a testing ground to see if an East Coast audience would be interested in an East Coast version of Disney. And that sounds crazy to say today because Disney's popular all around the world, and you think who wouldn't be into Disney? But at the time, there was this like popular sentiment that Disneyland was sort of a West Coast California thing, and that like the elite in New York or the more, educated in New York would just turn away from like such simpleton and entertainment. And of course that wasn't the case. Everybody loves Disney. But this fair and the popularity of not only the fair, but the attractions that Walt worked on proved to be extremely helpful for him to tell that, like, this is okay. We can do a park on the East Coast and people will go to it. And on the other hand, it was also a great way for him to put R&D into new concepts for his attractions without actually footing the bill, because it worked on a heavily, corporate sponsorship model, similar to what you see in the parks today. You've got Siemens sponsoring Spaceship Earth, which means they're footing the bill to keep that ride maintained. And so what would happen is these companies would reach out and they would pay Walt Disney to develop and create these attractions for the World's Fair. And then part of the contract that he would have with them is that after it was over, he could take the attraction back to Disneyland. And to be fair, that was a perfectly fine thing to request because, what is General Electric going to do with the Carousel of Progress? They don't have anywhere to put it. Like, it's going to get torn down and thrown away. So yeah, let them have it, especially if they maintain the relationship of that sponsorship, and then it remains a General Electric attraction, which is what happened for many, many years. And so he created 4 attractions for the World's Fair, and some of them are extremely popular, and you know them today. The It's a Small World was created for, I believe, the UNICEF Pavilion. You have Carousel of Progress, which was part of the General Electric Pavilion. You have the Illinois Pavilion, which sponsored Great Moments with Abe Lincoln, which was the first humanoid animatronic that sort of paved the way for what we have here in Disney World today as the Hall of Presidents. And then he did, was it Ford? I think it was with Ford. I actually don't have it bookmarked here, but he did a transportation pavilion. Now that attraction didn't actually end up in one of the parks as far as I recall. It was sort of like you'd get in a car and it would talk about the history of transportation and then a little bit about the future of transportation. Maybe it did end up in Disneyland. I don't know my Disneyland history as well as my Disney World. I do know it didn't end up in Disney World. However, here in Epcot, and we're going to walk over to Test Track, we had a ride called World of Motion, which was very, very similar, if not eerily similar to this attraction at the World's Fair. So we sort of got a spiritual successor to that ride. Let's take our back alley here. And so, yeah, it was really important. It was a great part of Disney history. I think it's a great part of New York history. I'm actually, people talk about wishing rides can come back, and if you could bring back a ride, what ride would you bring back? And my answer is always none. I don't really want to bring back any closed rides. I don't miss any of them. I loved a lot of old rides that are gone, but I don't need to ride them again. I have those memories. But if there's one thing I really wish we would bring back as a concept, at least here in the United States. I know they still do them around the world, but they don't get the sort of focus that they should, is World's Fair, or World Expo, or however you want to call it. And they poke at some of these ideas in the Marvel movies. Like if you look at Iron Man or the first Captain America, you have the Stark Expo, which is like showing the future of tomorrow through all these pavilions. And that was basically their version of the World's Fair. And it makes sense because Tony Stark's dad, whose name is, of course, now escaping me, Howard Stark, is supposed to be sort of like a combination of like a Howard Hughes and a Walt Disney. So it sort of makes sense there. And I don't know. I think there is a need to get people excited for the future. There's a need to get people looking forward and being optimistic. Let's just design let's do a car. Let's do a tall car. We'll make it a green car. How tall can we make it? That's a pretty tall car. Can we make it longer too? There we go. Next, let's do engine. Let's do plasma burner. I think that was it. Okay. I think we need these things to keep people optimistic and excited for the future. And yes, you can show off a lot of this stuff on the internet, and that's why I think this sort of idea of a World's Fair has fallen to the side, because it's so much cheaper to just, have... Oh, that's a fast pass. Whoops. I don't have fast pass. But ultimately, I do think there is value in physically going to a place and seeing something in person and seeing companies put effort into showing off these things, because I think that says a lot about how confident they are about these ideas. And so I would love to see another World's Fair, The idea of Epcot was supposed to be a living city, but then the second idea for Epcot when it became a park was to sort of be a perpetual World's Fair. And that's in a way what it is, right? You have the country pavilions, and then you've got the company pavilions that show off technology, and it's sort of transforming into a more traditional theme park. But, I think the fact that Epcot has lasted as long as it did as a theme park shows that there is some desire for a World's Fair. And I just think it would be a lot of fun. And getting this book and looking at some of these photos, if you've never seen it, like, you don't need to go out and buy a book. If you just do some Google image searches, take a look at the New York World's Fair in 1964. It is a spectacle that they got all these companies and countries together to build all of these buildings over the course of a couple of years in one spot to just show off the best of what they have to offer. And it drew millions and millions of guests, and it was super popular. And the real funny part is that World's Fair is actually not an official World's Fair, because there were so many World's Fair going on at the time or around that time. They created a bureau, and I want to, off the top of my head, remember what the name of the bureau was. It was like the IBE or something. International Bureau of Expos or something, where they would get together and they would make official World's Fair so that there weren't too many too often. And there was one set up, I think, for Germany in the 60s. And so the team behind the New York World's Fair, including Robert Moses, went to get like their blessing, and they were like, no, you can't make a World's Fair. In fact, things got so heated that they went beyond just saying no and said any of the countries in our organization are forbidden from making pavilions for this fake World's Fair. And Robert Moses and the team was like, well, we're going to do it anyway. And they did it anyway. And what they did is, instead of getting the countries directly to build pavilions, they went to companies within those countries to build pavilions that represented the countries. And that's actually funny, because that is essentially what happened with a lot of the country pavilions here in Epcot, because it was very tough to get long-term funding from a government, because, even here in the U.S., if we were to get funding for the U.S. pavilion from the U.S. government, you can't get them to commit to 10 years, because every 4 years we have a new presidential election. Every couple of years we have new Congress voted in. And so it's hard to know on paper whether people in, 6, 7, 8 years are going to be down to continue funding this. So they did that. And then there were even a couple of countries that just like went against the Bureau and were like, we're going to do a pavilion anyway. And they did. And, I would say, granted, I'm biased because I'm coming from the perspective of an American in America, but I would say the New York World's Fair is among the top 3 most popular World's Fair in the history of World's Fair. I think the other two go to Chicago, which was also, funny enough, has some Disney history because at the time Walt was just a little baby, but his father Elias worked as a carpenter to build the Chicago World's Fair. I think it was like the 1901. And then there was the other New York's World's Fair held in the same place in, I want to say, the 40s. It was like between World War I, World War II. So it's really interesting. I feel like that's a part of Disney history that gets overlooked a lot because it's not directly Disney related, but it is certainly important to the history of a place here like Disney World, and definitely worth looking into. If not, just looking at videos and photos. It's just a cool spectacle you don't get to see many, that often these days. And there's also a video out there, and I'll try and remember to link to it in the description, of an audio interview that Walt had with some radio person at the World's Fair. And I just think it's really interesting to listen to because it's probably the clearest quality audio I've ever heard of Walt Disney in my life. And it almost makes him sound a little different. And so it's really interesting to listen to him. And he's talking about things. And it's interesting listening to him because this is at the World's Fair. And so we know after the fact that in the back of his mind, he's planning Epcot. He's planning Walt Disney World. And yet he doesn't really talk about any of that stuff because it's all still a big secret. And I don't know, that sort of thing's really fun to me. I was looking for that. I don't know. I was looking for other books too. I'm always looking for like interesting, different Disney books. I feel like the easy Disney books are like things on Imagineering and design and the cartoons and stuff like that. But for me, it's always like the business Disney stuff that interests me. There's a couple of books I haven't picked up yet that I want to, all about Disney's approach to customer service that I want to read, because honestly, it's world renowned and people pay to learn how to do it. And I think it'd be interesting to see from a company perspective what the purpose is or why they do certain things they do rather than just, making things magical. But, got to dig around for them. They're pretty hard to find, these books. I mean, not a lot of demand for them. Barnes & Noble has some of it, but for the most part, you just got to order them online. They're like if I remember on Amazon Prime and I'm like trying to prime something and, I get add-on items, which means you have to spend like, I think it's $20 or $25 before those add-on items count. My go-to is usually to find like a cheap Disney book that I could pick up and throw to my library. Wow, I can't believe we've been talking for like 20 minutes already. It feels like it's flying by. So yeah, a lot of changes coming to Epcot. Some cool history. There's a street fair going on in my neighborhood today, not just San Gennaro, but all around New York. So I don't know if it's audible from the microphone. I'm just getting excited. I'm so excited for January. It's weird. It's so far away in my mind because we still have a couple of months to get through, but I'm really psyched for it more than any other trip I've been on recently. And I think it's just because it's going to be so drawn out and so I can relax and it could be a real vacation rather than like a work vacation. It's going to be a good time. So I want to thank you all for watching. Let's see, what can I plug? I've got all of my social networks. If you want to hear my Disney ramblings on Twitter, I'm at RobPlays. If you want to see my Disney photos, I'm on Instagram at RobPlaysThatGame. I have so many. I just finished the other night editing the rest of my Disney photos from August, and I believe I have enough that I could put up one a day between now and January, the January trip. So if you want to see those, check them out on Instagram. The TTA podcast, Christina and I have been doing for a couple of weeks now. We're really loving it. It's like growing and evolving into a show that's sort of becoming our own. You can check it out at ttapodcast.com, or you could look it up on anywhere you would get a podcast. It's called the Tomorrowland Transit Authorities. We do it every Friday. Yeah, and then just if you want to see more Disney content like this, whether it's Minecraft related or not, Christine's coming over later today. We're going to record a bunch of videos for the future, so we're going to have some more Imagineering for Dummies in the works. We're going to have some top fives. We're also going to have some just general fives. I don't know what you would call those, where they're not ranked. So subscribe if you want to see that content regularly. I do 3 a week. Again, thank you for watching. Whatever you're doing this week, make the most of it, because it makes it that much better. If you want to check out all this stuff in Minecraft, I'll have a link to MC Magic in the description below. And I'll see you all next time for the next Day in the Parks. Bye, everybody.